welcome to my lunch hour, Aloha Friday, and fall. We're in fall already. It's hard to believe that I've seen Christmas displays out. Holy mackerel, how did this year go by so fast? Anyway, welcome to Stan the Energy Man. I'm Stan Osserman from the Hawaii Center for Advanced Transportation Technologies, and it looks like I might even be getting a new logo. I just went up to HTDC yesterday and got a chance to look at their new logo, and it looks like I might get one too, so we'll have a big unveiling sometime in the not too distant future. But thanks for joining us today. I'm here with a really great guest, Jay Fidell. It's my turn to interview him a little bit. Actually, we're just going to talk a little bit. But what we're going to talk about today is the fact that now that I'm kind of linked into grids because of all of this transportation stuff is kind of overlapping in grids, we start to look at the grid and hydrogen and transportation as more of an integrated system. And when you do have an integrated system, you really need to think more deeper about things than just efficiency. And we tend to look at efficiency as kind of the first thing you do with renewable energy. You get your friend Ray Starling to run into your building and make it really efficient, you know, and look for ways to turn things off and rewire things and get new HVAC systems. And, you know, so we always think efficiency, but we never think much past efficiency, especially when I start working with the national labs. Those PhD guys, they love to look at efficiency and kind of latch onto it and make decisions on efficiency. But when you start digging a little bit deeper and you start looking at what the power companies have to deal with, or what I have to deal with when I start doing big projects with the Air Force, you have to dig a lot deeper into more than just efficiency. So to start off with, what really is efficiency? And it's really avoiding waste. So it's just trying to get the most of what you put in to come out. So in essence, that's the gestalt of efficiency. I put in this much, I get out the most on the other end of what I'm looking for. And that's good, usually. But you can be totally efficient and not effective, and that's not good. So when we start to look at effectiveness, that's getting what you want out of what you put in. So when we talk about efficiency in the energy world, we really need to look at energy efficiency and effectiveness. In other words, HECO could probably be really efficient, but your power may be brown sometimes, and it may drop off online a whole lot. They have to be effective and efficient. And when you mix those two things together, the challenges start to get really big. So we're just going to talk a little bit about efficiency and effectiveness as part of a system, and me trying to get transportation meshed into the grid and how we're going to do that. So I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about things like solar, which is really popular, but there's all kinds of solar, right? You got solar.
Why don't you start by talking about the whole system?
Okay.
The whole system. I mean, what has to be integrated with what?
Okay. Well, that's what I was saying. When you talk about integrating transportation with the grid, it would be things like, we used to have plug-in electric cars where we just thought we got energy into the car from the grid. But in reality, those cars are also storage plugged into the grid. So we have to make that leap from being in the receive-only mode out of HECO to we're receiving, but we can also put back in if you set it up right.
Why?
Because HECO needs storage when you start talking renewable. Whenever you're dealing with intermittent renewables, like solar and wind, things like that, you have to have storage. So it makes your system a little more complicated. But we're so used to looking at the grid as Kahi power point, pushing power out to a substation, pushing power to a transformer, pushing power to houses. And we don't think about the fact that if everybody had Leafs and Teslas and stuff plugged into the grid, that those things become storage out in the grid. And HECO could use that storage to help balance its grid where they have a lot of renewables. And we haven't evolved to that level of thinking, in my opinion, on things like the grid. So that's why I wanted to talk a little bit about.
So that's one thing, okay?
Yeah.
So then you got storage at HECO, or rather, you got energy at HECO.
Right.
You got energy in the car, and you put them together. So they're passing whatever the other one wants back and forth.
Right.
And so that's a system. What else is on the system?
Well, so like we're looking at hydrogen vehicles coming out next. So in that case, we're looking at, well, if HECO can't absorb all the solar in like Mililani or some neighborhood, Well, if they had a hydrogen electrolyzer out in that neighborhood, and when they needed to dump power because they were getting too much solar, and then, you know, they could put it into the electrolyzer and make hydrogen and store the hydrogen. And then in the evening, instead of cranking up the Kahi power plant and spinning it up faster to send more electrons out to Mililani, they would have power generation out in Mililani, as well as people with their cars plugged in that are electric cars that maybe need some of that power, but they could tell them, wait a bit, wait till 10 or 11 tonight before you charge, and then we'll charge you up, but we'll take power from this electrolyzer or this fuel cell and take the hydrogen and start putting power back into the grid out where you need it. Because realize whenever you push power through a line, there's resistance and heat, and you lose energy.
Degradation.
So
I'm just wondering, why would you do that instead of just keeping the hydrogen?
Because I need hydrogen out in the community. We need hydrogen out around the island so that when people start driving hydrogen cars, HECO can be selling hydrogen like Chevron does at a gas station. And then maybe even selling hydrogen to Chevron to dispense at their gas stations.
So in this system we're designing here today, suppose I get a renewable solar, and I use an electrolyzer, and I make that into hydrogen, and I have one of those big tanks.
A couple big tanks. Yeah, we get a couple big tanks and store maybe 500, 600, 700, 800 kilograms of storage out in your neighborhood. You know, maybe near a school that's a community shelter for an emergency.
Yeah.
And be able to take that hydrogen and not only have it available for transportation, but also be able to take maybe one of our bigger schools that's a disaster center and have energy sitting right there in case you need to use it during a disaster. And you have the renewables that can make electricity in that neighborhood. You have the electrolyzer that can store hydrogen, make hydrogen and store it in that neighborhood. You can dispense it to cars. You can have it available for a disaster when you use your shelter, your school shelter. Not only do you have the PV on the school to reduce the DOE's electric bill, but you have energy available for that shelter during an emergency. That HECO doesn't have to worry about bringing that area back online right away because you're already islanded. You're basically islanded on their grid, and you can feed power to your own little microgrid, essentially.
So the tank of hydrogen has a place in this system also.
Exactly.
And it's fungible, and you can store it. You don't have
Right.
to use it right away. You can move it between the islands at convenience.
Sure.
You can, have a ton of it around.
In fact, I was gonna talk specifically about storage and compare batteries and hydrogen in terms of storage mediums, a little bit later on. We'll talk about the system first, but that's a really important point. And we'll get into the whys, and we start to compare. And that was the genesis of talking about efficiency and effectiveness. Just because a battery is efficient and gives you back more power than a hydrogen system would give you in terms of efficiency, it may not be the best choice when you get to certain points.
Boy, I'm with you. So now what else is on the system? I suppose
Okay.
if I have a home battery like that new blue ion battery, or a larger battery at a regional station, or what do you call it, a switching station, whatever you call that, regional station. And then I have a really big one at the utility. All of that is in the system, right?
Yes.
And they're all talking to each other.
Should be.
If this one is low, gets a charge. If that one's
Right.
high, charges something else. Sort of an equalizing,
Right.
trying to find the
Yes.
best level everywhere.
So in this system, again, our grids have been designed over the last 100+ years to take power from a generation station and push it one direction. It's not really set up to sit there and do a talking back and forth. So that's one of the things that I'm saying as we look at this as a system, we need to morph into that level where the power can go both ways. It can come out of the field and spread into its neighborhood. Probably wouldn't go all the way back to the generation station, but could spread out from where it's being generated back into parts
I
of the
know
grid.
this is a ridiculous question, Stan, but, so I have power here, and I'm transferring it to this guy over here. Okay, so it goes this way on the wire. Okay,
And we're talking
now I have
AC.
power here.
Well, that's not a
transferring it
ridiculous
there.
question. That's what HECO's got.
So can they both go at the same time?
No, they can't.
Okay,
And
this
that's
is
part of
really
the-
important.
and
I hope
yeah,
you're
it
writing
is.
this down.
That is really important. Yeah, it's AC power. It makes a circuit. So what you have to do though is you have to be able to say, okay, we're gonna cut off this area and let it take care of itself for a while. And then HECO will just say, we're not sending anything that way past here. But it has to be able to sense it, or there has to be a part of the system that tells HECO, okay, we're ready to connect back. So when our frequencies and everything match up and everything looks good, now we can connect back together. And now HECO will pick up that circuit again.
Is this in milliseconds or seconds or
It's in
10 minutes at a
milliseconds.
time?
And
Okay.
that's another important point. These switches have to happen really quickly. But so does that balancing piece have to be pretty accurate. I mean, there's only certain tolerances that HECO can deal with before they pull somebody back on, but they can be done. And so that's why we need to start looking and developing that. As you probably heard, I don't know, you've heard of the term spiders with the military? You've never heard of that? Okay. The military has a program called Spiders. It's a joint energy program, and they're in phase 3 right now. Fortunately for us, 2 of the phases have been done on Oahu, one at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, and HCAT was actually part of that, that Spiders 1 before I came on board when Tom Quinn was running things. And then Spiders phase 3, which is being done at Camp Smith right now, where they're taking and making a microgrid at Camp Smith and able to generate their own power and do what would be similar to peak shaving at Camp Smith, where basically they would be able to pick up their own load, and when HECO doesn't need any more load, they can pick it up themselves and run it. So Spiders is kind of a military version of what we're looking at when we talk about this big system, except it would need to expand out to the Oahu grid, and I guess essentially any of the island grids if they want to be part of it.
I know a young engineering student, and I told him, you want to make money? You know, write code, write programming code for electrical movement, you know, move it here, move it there, smart grid stuff. I don't think we're doing that here in Hawaii, and yet we talk about smart grid all day, and you also hear stories about black boxes that are being tested for 5 years at a time, but that aren't ready. You know, I think we could be the king, the queen, the king and queen of
Are you the queen or am I the queen? I don't want to go
we're
there.
not going there. This is a family show.
Okay, sorry. No, but I hear you, and actually that's a really great thing for Robbie Milton up at HTDC. You know, those folks have a lot of coders, and their Wetware Wednesday program and stuff they've got going on is a great way to try and field this kind of idea. But you're right, we're trying to promote high tech in Hawaii. We're trying to promote doing things different here that we can export to the rest of the world and create jobs here. So we should have somebody writing code that can do what I'm talking about in this system, because it certainly isn't me. I'm an analog brain, and the young kids today are digital brains, and they can do this stuff.
The logic is easy. You know, if you get a signal, then push it this way. If you get the other kind of signal, push it that way.
Right.
So you got sensors, you got gates, you know, electronic gates, moving it this way and that way. You got algorithms written into the software and black boxes. I mean, you know, it seems to me that our stuff and our problems, you know, and our grid issues are, I know there's other people doing this on the mainland, but we are the real laboratory.
Exactly.
And we could write it better, just as you say, and export it.
I think you're right. And I tell you what, we're going to pick up in about 60 seconds and pick up on that theme. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Ethan Allen. I host Likeable Science on ThinkTech Hawaii, and I do this because I care about science literacy in Hawaii. I want to spread the understanding that science is a vital and interesting part of everyone's life. I want to make sure the broadest possible spectrum of people understand the beauty and the value of science and realize that science plays out each and every day of their lives. I want you to understand that science is fun. So we bring onto this show each week guests who are scientists, from astronomers to zoologists, and we talk about what they do and how they do it. But most importantly, we talk about why you should care about their work, why you should see that their work has value and impact on your life. So I hope you'll join us Fridays, 1 p.m. here on ThinkTech Hawaii. You can watch us via live stream. You can watch us recorded on Olelo, and you can see us each week. We hope you'll join us.
How you gonna store what they give you?
Hey, welcome back to my lunch hour. I'm here with Jay Fidell, and we're talking energy efficiency, systems, and big picture stuff that's really important to Hawaii. So thanks for joining us. But anyway, we were talking about how we need coders and folks to rewrite, this system and help HECO kind of move into a new vision of how they can do their grids. So there's some other things. I mean,
You know pseudocode? Pseudocode.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Pseudocode's in English.
Right.
And it says, if this, then that. And here's how you make decisions,
Right.
and this is what the rules are. And just write it out in English. I mean, I think a lot of people, not even engineers, a lot of people could do that with energy and with working the grid this way. Then, of course, you got to get the coding guys to actually make it happen with those arcane functions and methods and whatnot. But I don't think it's that hard for somebody who simply knows about what he wants in the grid to write out the pseudocode. And from there, we can do it.
Right, and some of the nice things about like the hydrogen piece, the electrolyzer really doesn't care much whether you're fully running on full speed all the time or whether you back off a little bit. I mean, it wants to keep running, but you can throttle it back, and it's usually built in stacks, so you may have 3 stacks or 6 stacks or 15 or 20 stacks. And when you don't need as much hydrogen, you just back off on a few of them. So you can absorb as much power or not as you need to at any given time. So that makes it really scalable and real easy to fit into this system. That's another reason why hydrogen's kind of a neat option. And you still need batteries. You still need batteries out there to do that millisecond switch and to pick up big peaks in the load that happen when everybody, I use the term flushes their toilet at the same time, but in electrical terms, everybody turns on their margarita machine at the same time, and you get this big surge of motor amps spinning up to drive your system. You still need batteries there to take those quick spikes in the load so that you can smooth everything out.
Is
and
the
keep
battery
it smooth
faster than a fuel cell run
Yes.
by hydrogen?
Yes.
So
And
you
that's-
probably want to distinguish for situations where you need instant response.
Right.
Use a battery.
We always look at batteries as a partner to the hydrogen fuel cell system to pick up that quick load and help do the smoothing of the power, but the hydrogen is kind of the long haul storage and give the power you need for a long, but when it can kick in pretty quickly, but it's just not the millisecond kick in, it's like half a second or 1 second. So you need the battery in there to do its job, and then you do the hydrogen.
When you say quickly, more quickly than the other, what about expense? I mean, if I had to respond to a call for power from a battery, or I had to respond to a call for power from a fuel cell, an hydrogen fuel cell arrangement, which one would be more expensive?
I don't know how you'd price it out, because that's one of the things I want to talk about in terms of effectiveness and efficiency. When you start looking at systems, if you have a battery system, number one, it wears out after a few years. It'll start to degrade on its own over time. When you make it at the factory, you're using rare earth metals. You have dirty processes that you're making this battery, and you have to replace it every so often. When you get rid of it, you give it back to Elon Musk, and he turns it into the wall and use it in your house. But I mean, there's things with batteries that are the downsides, or they're big, they're heavy. A megawatt battery is a big chunk of battery. I mean, and then when you put that much battery power, especially with lithium type batteries, you have thermal runaway issues if it's not handled right, if it's not controlled right. So you have other expenses that you may or may not run into, or you may or may not see, because you're just going and buying it. But there's other expenses, like, do you want to have a clean environment? What's that worth to you? There's an expense there, but we never seem to quantify it. We never put it in things.
But we could.
But we could, and we should, and that was the whole gist of what I wanted to talk about today. Was we need to look at all those less tangible things, the cultural aspect, and how each different renewable technology impacts that. So we have solar, and you have solar on your roof. You have solar like an industrial, like Kauai has the solar, commercial level solar in their co-op. Those are two radically different ideas on solar and have to be handled differently. But then you have wind, and wind is kind of neat. The big wind can handle storms. You just feather the props and stop them, and they can survive because they're strong. And the little ones, you can stop them and fold them up. But in the middle, there's nothing made right now. So we're trying to do some of that at Hickam. But the big wind turbines have their own set of issues. Number one, birds. You know, if you go to visit Maui and the Sun Edison folks on Maui, they have an entire, what we would call in the Air Force, BASH program, but basically it's a bird hazard program where they sit there and find out how many birds those blades will hit, because those blades don't look like they're spinning real quick. But I'm here to tell you that tips of those blades are doing 150 to 200 miles an hour when you have your average trade winds blowing. And I've seen videos of birds playing chicken, you know, big birds playing chicken with wind turbines until they lose. And it kills birds. And the one thing we don't want to do is kill any birds.
Aren't they
what kind of
making
price tag do you
making
put on that?
Run slower now?
I don't know if
So
you
the
can.
birds can actually see the trajectory?
I don't think they can, well, basically they blow as fast, they turn as fast as the wind will blow them unless you restrict them. And I don't know of anybody personally that's restricting the speed on their wind turbines just for birds. But you get it down to a smaller scale where they're spinning faster, and you can do what the airplanes do. Put a little spiral on the front of the nose cone, and the birds think it's another bird flying at them, and then they avoid it. They don't try and play chicken with it, they try and stay away from it. So maybe we need to look at that part of a system and say, well, the big wind turbines are big, but they also produce power pretty cheaply. I just saw a product from NREL saying that some of those wind farms now are selling, they can sell power at 3 cents a kilowatt hour and 4 cents a kilowatt hour,
really
and they're
cheap.
making money.
Yeah.
Because they've gotten the prices down to where they can do a kilowatt for like $2.50 or $2,500 a kilowatt in terms of capital cost to build all these things. And that's, we used to look at $4 and $5 as the mark to hit.
Looking at that, I mean, why don't we do more wind in Hawaii?
I think just because of, we're a tourist-based community, and these things are pretty big, and they, you know, there's a lot of people, including me, that it's like, I don't like seeing big wind turbines all over my mountains and stuff. But if we scaled them and designed them differently, maybe they could fit into architecture. Like John Petrie's wind designs that he makes over here, they fit into the architecture. They're part of the building. They're part of the roof. They're part of the, you can put them in landscape where they don't sit there and stick out like you know, a big skyscraper on your mountainside. So like that's another thing about, it's not just efficiency. Yeah, the wind is cheap. You can do those things, especially on the mainland, pretty cheaply. But does it fit in Hawaii with all the other variables?
Makes it hard because it's hard to quantify that.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some of the other things? We talk about geothermal. When I was on the Big Island with Paycom looking at one of their waste to energy plants, I talked to them about, you know, geothermal, because we're sitting there at the Volcano National Park up at what is that, the rec center up there, KMC, and they got geothermal all over the place. So I asked one of the park archaeologists, who was a nice Hawaiian lady, federal employee, works for the Park Service, and I said, explain to me, really from a cultural perspective, what's the real rub with geothermal in Hawaii? Do we really have a Pele thing that we're concerned about respecting Pele, and is that the real beef, or is there technical stuff where we're scared of it? Or, I mean, what's the real drawback? And she's from the Big Island, and she works at the Park Service, and she said it's complicated. It's a little of all that. It's a little bit of the cultural thing, and it's a little bit of, you know, blow out of a geothermal well is kind of a big, you know, noisy thing. But when you look at geothermal, it's got one of the things that the other two renewables don't have. It's a great baseline. It doesn't change. 24 hours a day, it can give you the
Firm
same.
dispatchable
right,
power.
it's firm dispatchable power that HECO doesn't have to worry about storage. They can use it as part of their base load, and then they can turn off a fossil fuel power plant because they have a firm base load. So even as we look at different renewable technologies, they have different benefits that have a value. But does the dispatchable power base load, does that overweigh our cultural concern about, you know, Pele? Are we being disrespectful to you know, Hawaiian culture when we do this kind of thing? So we have to start looking at all those pieces that fit together. Then we have waste to energy, which is one that we don't think about much, but, you know, we have all these hotels making food waste and sewage waste, and you can't hardly turn a page on the paper nowadays without, oops, we dumped some raw sewage or partially treated sewage someplace and the beach is closed for a while. That's not good for tourism either. So why is it we don't take those products which make methane, which is a really bad greenhouse gas, and turn them into something we can use? Those are other renewable sources that we don't always think of as renewable because they're not necessarily clean. It's still methane. We're still doing something with a fossil fuel, but it's methane that we're making and we're gonna get rid of anyway. So we either flare it and just burn it and make it less than methane as far as a greenhouse gas, or we turn it into a fuel and make electricity with it and try and get it as clean as we can before we release any gases.
Why don't we do that?
Well, that's that Schofield project that came out in PBN that we talked about before the show. That's where that one's going, where they'll use some methane to make a fuel to run generators, biofuels to run generators, and it's a little bit cleaner. It's a step in the right direction. But that's like $160 million project. It's a pretty pricey project. So it's a big investment for what they're doing. But
it's like a mind map, you know, you ever see a mind map? Schematic kind of thing.
Exactly.
And you connect them all. And then you see what's in the center and what's coming in and what's coming out. And you figure out a way to serve every user. And you figure out how to take every source. And then I suppose you have to make choices based on the, what do we call it, the philosophical cost against the dollar cost, against the environmental cost and all that.
Right.
But you can program all this too.
Exactly. And I should talk to Mitch Ewan about that up at H&EI, because he uses that mind mapping a lot when he's laying out projects.
He did the other day for Energy Policy Forum.
Yeah. But so when you have waste energy, you have another subset of issues, because you can take that same waste methane and you can make hydrogen out of it. And you can do steam methane reforming, which is how you get most of the cheap hydrogen on the mainland out of LNG. But you could take that same methane and make it into hydrogen and put it into that transportation system I talked about as well.
Doesn't this suggest to you, I mean, I don't like to, you know, drop off your vision, but for a moment, doesn't this suggest that we need some leader who rolls the sleeves up and puts all the pieces together? We don't have that. That's why we don't have the mind map.
Well, I said yes to that question last week, and somebody said it was me that I was supposed to do that.
You're
And
the
I go,
hydrogen.
"Yeah, I'm not, no."
Well, you know, but frankly, I mean, that opens the whole question of whether what you're doing as the hydrogen man can be what you're doing, what you could do as the energy man. We do call you Stan the Energy Man.
True.
So we're on the road to there anyway, Stan.
So I should have put my campaign together? Or
Yeah, I'm your first supporter.
No, I'm actually working closely with Mark Glick, and we're gonna try and make some of this stuff happen, because he is the energy man. He's the energy guy for the state. So we'll put a
If you
package
can help
together.
him do it, it'd be great.
He's a busy man. He's got a lot on his plate.
But this is priority number one, because everything depends on this. You know, if I give you the mind map and I give you all the pieces out there, then it's just a matter of connecting the dots, actually.
Well, I'll put the mind map together right after we go and take a break here. So we'll be back in 60 seconds.
Hi, my name is Cindy Matsuki, and I host the show High Growth with HTDC on ThinkTech Hawaii. This is the show where we talk about all things tech, innovation, entrepreneurship, and manufacturing, because there's so many things going on in Hawaii and more people should know about them. So this is the program that you can come and find out about all the things happening in Hawaii. And this show also airs on Olelo 54 along with ThinkTech Hawaii. And it broadcasts live every other Tuesday at 3 p.m. So don't forget, check out the show Tuesday, 3 p.m. every other week. High Growth with HTDC. Thanks.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on ThinkTech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Andrew the Security Guy, every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
See?
Hey, welcome back to Stan Energy Man on my lunch hour. And we're here with Jay Fidell, and we're going to keep on going with mind mapping and all things to work on our system.
You said you were
for
going
the
to do
grid.
it during the break.
Yeah, I know. Well, I lied. No. But there's even more pieces to this. I had Dr. Hans Kroc.
Hans Kroc.
From who is like the head of he founded the oceanographic energy side up at UH. And he was a fascinating guy. And, you know, we started talking about OTEC. And that's another great baseload renewable source that I had no idea what it can contribute to the state of Hawaii. And when you think about, we've got Kahi Power Plant in Waianae, or Nanakuli area. And if I'm a fisherman, so right offshore in Nanakuli and Waianae, it's 3,000, 4,000 feet deep. I mean, just a couple miles offshore, that's what makes it such a great place to go trolling is. You got a deep water and a nice ledge and it drops off really deep. You could put OTEC out in that same area and provide a whole lot of great baseline power and feed it right into where they're already generating power and distributing it through the grid. But that's another one of those things that it's such a good baseline power that you don't need to worry about storage like you do with solar and wind. So we got so many options we could fit into this system, and we need to get our mind map going. We got Mitch working on it right away, and have him see if he can map something out. But those are the kind of things that I think about. But you know, I know most of the people at home that are thinking solar, and they've made an investment already, and it's on their house, and they want to start using it, and they want to have the interconnect and things. You know, we really do need to think about storage to help those folks keep on doing it at their house.
What do you think about the blue ion? If not the, you know, this is Hank Rogers' blue energy,
Right.
I think he calls it. And he's got a guy, I want to say Greg Murphy over there, who is selling the blue ion for, I don't know what the price is. He wasn't specific.
It's a little expensive, but it's phenomenal. I mean, from what I've seen, and the nice thing about Hank and his guys on the Big Island, Paul Pontian and those folks, is they didn't ask Sony to give them this battery and let them try it. They said, no, we're going to buy this battery from you because we're going to abuse it. We're going to do everything you said it would do, and we're going to really push it. And they said, okay, so Sony sold them these batteries, the first set, and they discharged them every day to 0 and recharged them in 90 minutes. And the only thing that they would tell us was, the engineers lied, these batteries are better than they said they were. You know, so they lied in a good way, not like some other Volkswagen.
Some of the Volkswagen companies. Yeah.
But no, the Sony batteries actually outperformed what the Sony engineers said they would do. And if you haven't seen these batteries up close, they're just amazing because it looks like a stereo rack or a server rack. And you have the different cells, the different battery cells in there. And you go up and touch them while they're charging, and they're cool. It's room temperature.
Yeah.
And you go, well, where's the fans? You don't hear any fans blowing because there's no fans. These things charge and discharge, and they don't raise the temperature in that cabinet more than 2 or 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Now tell me what batteries can do that. And they've run them, I think they're going into their 3rd year now. So they've been using these batteries.
Hank Rogers has.
Right, for 2 solid years, and these things are performing really, really well. So that's why Hank and those folks put together the deal with Sony to distribute the batteries, because they're really sold on them. And from what I've seen, I'm sold on them too.
Yeah.
So, but you know, I'm a transportation guy, so my question is, when can I put it in a car? Because if they're that good, I want to put them in a car, but they're not ruggedized yet. Maybe that's one of those.
What does that mean?
When you put it in a car, it gets vibrated and shaken. When it's in your house, maybe loud music once in a while will shake it up a little, but you know, that's another one of those efficiency effectiveness things. It may be a great battery in a house, but it may not translate to transportation. But it would be great if it did, because that's the kind of battery technology that would actually help in the transportation sector. So maybe Panasonic or Sony or Hitachi or somebody is really looking at this technology.
I think the secret sauce is phosphorus. It's, what is it, lithium?
Lithium iron phosphate.
Phosphate, sorry, phosphate. And the phosphate doesn't exist in the standard lithium ion batteries. So that's, somehow that gives it its good properties.
I'm sure there's a bunch of scientists with a bunch of metals on the table doing all kind of
right now.
What works good.
Yeah.
But that's been the key for so long. In fact, on a couple of shows ago, we talked about transportation. And did you know the very first Porsche was an electric car? And people don't realize that when we started doing vehicles, the engineers and the scientists all went right to electrical because it works. it's got the torque, it's got everything you need. The problem was the batteries. You couldn't store energy on those little cars because the batteries weighed so much and they were so big, it defeated the purpose. And that's again where we get back to the efficiency and effectiveness. We had efficient batteries, but they weren't effective because they were too big and too massive to put in these little cars with little skinny spoke wheels on them to do anything. So what happened? The internal combustion's invented, engines invented, it comes along, and we're stuck on gasoline and oil for now. But the fact is, they recognized early on that electrical powered vehicles was the way to go. And now we've got the battery technology that's gotten much better, and we've gotten it to the point where the batteries do work in your vehicles and can be part of your transportation
This is a
sector.
big problem for the system you're talking about, and for the Mitch Ewan's mind map and all that, because the technology changes.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, you know, this blue ion battery is something we're all interested in, maybe for cars, who knows what. And what are they, 1.2
Kilowatt hours.
Kilowatt hours, yeah.
Yeah.
So you need like 10 of them for your house, maybe more.
Well, but that whole rack is probably 10
10,
kilowatt
10,
hours.
yeah. Okay. So, I mean, but the point is, they're going to be modular, and they're going to be
Right.
useful for other things.
Sure.
And maybe instead of buying 10, I buy 100. And I have all kinds of possibilities.
Sure.
Changes everything. It's
Yes.
disruptive. So the problem I see is you make a mind map, you don't know what the technology is next month. You have to change your mind map, but on a large scale, because by definition, a mind map system is a large scale system.
Well, you just kind of identified the problem with a lot of our businesses today. The technology is changing so rapidly that you either adjust to it and adapt to it, or you're dead in the water. You know, because you cannot sit there and put all your money into something and then and say, okay, now what do we do when it gets replaced 5 years from now by something that can do it 3 times better?
It's a hidden
and
cost.
faster? Yeah.
If I do it this way,
Yeah.
I know that something else is going to happen, and I may have to throw this whole baby out and start again.
So you have to, it's almost like, how well do you design your business and your factory? How well can you transition and morph? Like you look at Tesla and Elon Musk. Okay, he's running these cars, and they're fancy cars, and they're nice, and they're great, and they have a lot of batteries in them. But like I said, the batteries deteriorate at a point where they're no longer good in the cars. But guess what? They're still great in the house. So now he has the wall, and he has all these batteries, and he refurbishes them, and now they use them in your house, and he gives them a new life. You know, you have to kind of make lemonade out of, you know, the lemons that happen in your business. And you know, but you look at hydrogen, and I guess that's the one reason why I'm kind of bullish on hydrogen. Hydrogen's been around since the Civil War. I mean, in application, in science, in study. And people have known about the advantages of it, and we've learned the safety stuff, and we know how to handle it right and everything. But nobody's been able to find a way to make it better. And the only criticism I have of hydrogen right now today is that when we try and put it in 10,000 PSI into a car, that's a lot of pressure. And I'm not worried about the safety as much as how much energy it takes to compress hydrogen to 10,000 PSI.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that energy cost of compressing it is a cost that I can calculate that's kind of steep, and I like to get away from it. So we're trying to work with a company here now that we're talking about metal hydride storage, which is one of the things that's being looked at. We use metal hydride to actually store the hydrogen, and when you heat the hydride up, then it releases the hydrogen. And there's a little company in Taiwan that's making little mopeds that you take 2 little canisters, they're about this long and about maybe 4 inches around, and you can go into 7-Eleven and take your 2 empty ones in, drop them in, and buy 2 new ones, go out and slide them under the seat of your moped, and you're off and running. And there's a company that makes those, and they've been trying them in Asia for a couple of years, and I think the inventor actually was from Hawaii, and he passed away at a fairly young age, but his idea is being carried on and is going. And I'm kind of looking to see those mopeds in Manoa here, not too long in the future, because that metal hydride storage actually kind of takes care of one of the problems that we have, which is compressing hydrogen and storing hydrogen, but having to spend all the energy to compress it.
It sounds like, you know, the technology is going to miniaturize things. It's going to make things more fungible. It's going to make it easier to get off the grid, stay off the grid. If I have a battery that big that will take all my solar and keep it overnight, I don't need to be on the grid.
Yeah, and we talked about that with, especially with Paul from the Big Island, Paul Pontio and Blue Planet Research guys. It's like, does it make sense if you've got 10 houses that are 2.5, 3 miles away from the nearest transformer and line, whether those guys should even run a line to their place or just design their neighborhood to be off the grid? And the answer is, probably makes sense to be off the grid.
Yeah.
And you might as well just plan your buildings and set them up, so they have a big south-facing roof and a lot of solar, and you put the batteries in there and you put other storage in there. I know up at Blue Planet where they have their lab, they're getting ready to put in flywheels and another solar array. And the solar array will spin the flywheels all day long. And then at night, when they need the power to run the community well,
It's a battery.
it's the storage. It's another form of storage.
Yeah.
And it has its great advantages. It's inexpensive, it's just basic. It's frictionless bearings with magnets that keep it just floating, so there's no friction.
Actually, nothing touches.
Yeah, there's nothing touching. So you get them spinning as fast as they'll go with the power you generate in the daylight. And at night, you turn around and generate electricity to run your well.
Yeah.
And all night long, in the daytime, you charge it up again. And again, throw a few batteries in the mix, you're off and running.
And you saw the press release on Hawaiian Electric's move to incentivize community solar now. They're going to let people invest in a community solar
Okay.
farm.
Yeah, the
and then
legislature
get
worked
their
on
power
that.
from that.
Yeah, the legislature worked on that last
So
session.
it's really happening right into the field
great.
now. PUC's got to approve it, but I think it's a reality.
Well, that's a good thing. For people who live in condominiums and stuff, they can't put solar on their lanai, at least not enough to make a difference.
Where
so-
that goes, though, is it makes a smaller grid.
Sure.
Because you could have that community solar independent, and it just provides electricity. With the solar and the battery, it provides all the electricity you want.
Yeah.
And so you don't need anything else.
Okay, Jay, well, I'm gonna sit down with Mitch and we're gonna mind map this whole thing out. And you've been a great guest, by the way. I should have you back sometime.
I'm available.
Okay. So that's gonna wrap us up for this Friday and Stan Energy Man. And thanks for being here with us. And thanks, Jay, for helping me out today. And we'll see you next week. Aloha.